an interview at some point. She's supposed to do one by the end of the month. President Trump has two events. One I left out of the day book because I'm careless. He's at Arlington National Cemetery and then giving remarks to Gold Star families. This is, of course, the third anniversary of the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, particularly the day the suicide bomber killed 13 American service members and more than 100 Afghans. And he will be appearing with at least some Gold Star family members. Then he's off to Michigan, Detroit, 2 p.m. Eastern Time speech to the National Guard Association, who also invited Vice President Harris. Not clear to me at this time whether she's appearing by video or not. We're going to talk about national security and about this concept of commander-in-chief, which we've never had a female commander-in-chief, and this is a relatively young person with relatively little national security experience, and we'll talk about that as a factor in this race. J.D. Vance is at a fundraiser in Kentucky today. Doug Emhoff is doing fundraising in New York. Elizabeth Warren is campaigning for Harris Walz in Wisconsin. And I don't know what Tim Walz is doing today, but my suspicion is not a thing. So, guys, I want to talk first about national security. Vice President Harris has a bar to clear, and I'm surprised how little discussion there's been about this. She mentioned national security at some length, given the other topics not discussed in her acceptance speech at the convention. This morning, she and President Biden put out matching statements, naming all 13 service members who lost their lives, talking about her appreciation for their service, and about defending the decision to withdraw from Afghanistan. We put up that statement if we can, just to show you the top of it. That went out in her name first thing this morning, shortly after President Biden, as I said, put out a virtually identical one. Now we want to show you a video that was originally on TikTok. It's been passed around other places that the Harris people think is a representation of her national security strength. Let's play that full, please, for everybody, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so Sean, I'm going to let you go first, and I have a funny feeling I know what you're going to say. Is that video badass, as one of her supporters said on Twitter, or something less than that?
So I'll start with it. I think if you're a supporter of hers, you think it's badass. I get why they think that. I think that they are awaking a sleeping giant that is not smart. I get why politically you want to lean into sometimes your negative or your weaknesses. I think considering the Tim Walz thing, considering their silence for the last 3 years, the idea that this is, I would not have recommended they go in this direction. I don't think that this is a smart move on their behalf. You are awakening a veterans community that is really pissed about how they've handled the military, the lack of silence when it comes to the sacrifice of those individuals in Afghanistan, and their smugness to which they have addressed it. So I think that I get why, if you're on the left, you think this is, quote, badass. I have a feeling that there's a lot of people who have not served that are around her that don't recognize how this might backfire.
Okay, Dan, what do you think?
Best defense is a good offense. I think they know it's a weakness. It's why at the convention they leaned into her, prosecutor days and being tough. I think it's good. I think obviously the Afghan withdrawal was one of the low points. It's when Biden's approval started to crater. And I think, you go on offense, and look, to state the obvious, her opponent's history when he went into office, other than negotiating, a few marketing deals overseas, he didn't have any military or foreign policy experience. And I think, you know, with all due respect to Sean, her opponent also has made a few comments that have been inopportune with the veterans community. So I think, you know, do the best you can and go on offense.
And like I said, I appreciate that. I mean, from a political standpoint, you go on offense, you try to address your weaknesses. I don't think that they have. This is for 3.5 years. There's been frankly, they have ignored this issue and this community, and suddenly to put out a statement on the 3rd year anniversary and act like somehow this has been a concern of yours. This is not her thing. I get, frankly, the DA stuff, leaning into that, being tough on crime. I actually, from a just strategic standpoint, I get that. It actually smart. This, I think, has a high probability of potentially boomerang.
Right. Sean, I want to ask you a question. I want to remind everybody we're going to get to your questions, comments soon. If you haven't been part of the conversation, especially, we'd love to have you. Please raise your hand. If you're here on the two-way platform, we'd love to have you part of it, and we'll get to you in just a bit. So thank you. Sean, just a quick follow-up. What are you objecting to? You're objecting to her talking about national security, or objecting to the music?
No, trying to drape yourself in the blanket of all of these service members acting like.
But she wants to be commander-in-chief.
I get that, but my point is that you are trying to create the image that you have been a supporter of theirs, a champion of veteran and military rights, and she's been.
But what would you have her do? Not talk about national security?
No. What I was saying, and that's what I was trying to say earlier. She can play the tough on crime issue. I think this idea of trying to do pictures and selfies and, you know, salute the guys, it looks like you've been their leader. You haven't. I mean, to be blunt, she has not been involved in national security. This has not been an area of hers. So to try,
I still don't understand what you're saying. She shouldn't talk about national security.
No. But you're conflating talking about it with showing a flashy video, leaning into it, and calling.
Okay, so you don't like the flashy video.
I think if she wanted to give a speech talking about it, absolutely. Here's how I'll act as commander in chief. Right. Here's what I'll do to buttress the military. Blah, blah. But all right, you can't be the champion of wokeness and all this crap that's gone on and suddenly pretend that you're going to go around and give a cheesy salute. That's not, I mean, I like I said, it's going to evoke a lot of emotions among a community that you just awoke a sleeping giant that I think you may.
Okay. Again, hands up for those who'd like to ask questions. And again, we'd love to have people who are new to the platform to be part of it as well. All right. Second topic is the debate. President Trump last night, So Truth Social, casting data about whether he still participate in the ABC debate. Politico has reporting today about whether the debate is going to actually happen, because there's lots of disagreements about the rules of the debate. Sean, I think we lost Dan for a moment, so I hope he's coming back. But while we wait for Dan to come back, there he is. Sean, question for you, which is this debate happening or not? Is this all just normal like bluster? Or is it possible it won't happen?
So I think it's not normal bluster, but I think it will happen. Ultimately, Trump needs this debate, so he will make it. I do think, I mean, look, caveat for everyone reading Politico, they basically have a Kamala Harris spokesman writing Politico playbook in Eugene Daniels. That being said, I mean, Dan can't help but laugh at that. Look, the reality is, it's funny. For weeks, it was Trump's backing out of a debate that he bought into with Biden, and now the Harris campaign is trying to change the rules, and suddenly it's, you know, I can't believe he won't agree to the rules change. The bottom line is they get it both ways. They get him, you know, when Trump was, and I was with Trump on this, the idea he agreed to 2 debates. Strategically, he made decisions because Biden was the candidate. Harris steps in and suddenly says, oh, you have to adhere to all the rules that we did, but now we get to change the format. So I think it happens. Ultimately, and we'll see. But I also think that the moderate, I mean, this thing, I actually am very concerned about this debate for the other reasons. And I think the Harris campaign knows it, that Trump has more to lose in this debate, clearly, than Biden did in the first one. And you're going into it with moderators, Lindsey Davis, et cetera, that are not looking to do Trump any favors. Not that they ever would, but they are hostile to him. This is not, this has a lot more
he agreed to a debate with hostile moderators, and that was, I think.
Yeah, well, I think a lot has changed.
Dan, will the debate happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think Harris needs it too, and I think there's as much pressure on her, given her kind of thin, you know, body of work here for the country. But I think that, Trump is historically works the referees. And so he is trying to, create the narrative that if he does well, he went into the lion's den and slayed the dragon. And if he doesn't, it was rigged from the beginning. And I think the best thing Harris can do is prepare. And historically, when she has time to prepare her attacks and traps, she does very well. And as we've talked a lot about here, where we have to see how much she has improved as a political athlete is when she goes off script. And so I think in that regard, a lot of this is process that most people don't care about, but whether she can handle the fire, off script, I think regular people will pay attention to.
All right, we're going to go to your questions. You can ask about the debates or about national security or anything you want. Terry, welcome in. As we say, tell us, for those who don't know, where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind.
I'm in Connecticut, in a state where no one really cares. We don't even see ads at all, ever. Voted for Trump the first time, voted for Biden the second time with remorse. I'm an independent. And I just want to say,
who are you supporting this time, Terry?
I still haven't decided.
Okay.
It may be no one. I don't know.
Okay. Go ahead.
Leaning heavily away from Harris as a candidate so far. She's showed me nothing that would suggest I should cast my vote for her. Nothing. I've seen nothing. Like, that video is an empty vessel. But anyway, what I want to say about the debate on ABC, why Trump would even agree to do it, given that he's in a lawsuit against the network and against Stephanopoulos. So it's, for me, it doesn't make any sense. It never did. It's like suing a restaurant because you got food poisoning and then agreeing to have your next birthday party in the restaurant while the lawsuit's going on. It's just,
or even catering your daughter's wedding.
Exactly. It just, and I don't know who's driving that train. It's a mystery to me. And why he could at least, or his team could at least say, hey, not doing it on ABC. We'll do it, but we need to figure out another way to get it done. There's so many other left-leaning media outlets that she could choose from. I know she won't do Fox, obviously, but the ball's going to be in her court in a lot of places that she can pivot to. So why not pivot? Why doesn't everybody stop being like a baby?
It could certainly be on two-way as well.
It could be two-way with a fantastic moderator.
Yeah,
Would you rather have Dan or Tim, just to be clear?
No, I'm not going there.
We need controversy.
I'm not going there.
Terry, thank you. Sean, Dan, questions?
No,
for Terry,
I think,
response?
look, I think it's a brilliant point. And the thing is, this gets me back to the first thing I said. I think Trump bought into this because it was Biden, and he thought, hey, I don't really care about all the format, moderator, who cares? I'll run circles around this guy. And those are the decisions you make at the time. And that's why I'm saying it's now he's dealing with the consequences of that. I agree with you. But the problem, Terry, is that he can't get out of it because the media will say, I mean, any normal person
$1,000,000%.
say, hey, this is ridiculous. I got food poisoning. I'm not coming back.
1,000,000%. He loses no matter what he does.
Yep. So, and if you're Harris, you have all those advantages that you just enumerated. Why would you not say, I'm sticking with ABC? So,
and when he was speaking at the Black Journalists convention or meeting earlier, that same woman who introduced him is on the moderation panel.
Yep.
Yeah.
She's already kind of indicated that she's got an issue with him.
Yeah.
So,
Terry, I got one question for you, and then we're going to move on to Phil. You didn't speak particularly favorably about Vice President Harris. Why aren't you just voting for Trump?
Because he needs to stay on message. If he can stay on message, he's going to persuade more people, but he just can't. And we keep still going down this rabbit hole.
Which years were better for your family's finances, the Trump years or the Biden years?
It's a no-brainer. Someone actually posted something that said, and it was a Harris supporter that said the stock market was at 19,000 when Biden took office, and now it's at 39,000, which means, and this is actually what it says, which means everyone's retirement account has doubled in the last 4 years. Where's the issue? And I just thought, how many wrong things about that statement are true? but I'm sure it had a lot of people nodding and saying, oh, yes, listen, there's no doubt we were immensely more financially better off 6
Yeah.
years ago before COVID
Yeah.
hit than we are now. There's no question. Everything my husband and I do is up 20 to 25%. Everything. It doesn't
Terry,
matter.
thank you. Thank you, Terry. Come back often. Phil, tell us, everybody who doesn't know, where you're from, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind.
Upstate New York, the Albany, suburb of Albany. Been a Democrat and a progressive all my life. Marched on Washington in 69. Voted Clinton, Biden, and will vote for Walz or Harris. I have a question for Sean. Sean, what does former President Trump mean when he says he doesn't need any more votes? He has all the votes he needs.
What does he mean and what should he say, Phil? There's two different questions.
I really want to know what he means, because
I think what he means is, hey, we have so much support. We just need everyone to go. I mean, he's trying to couch it in, oh, I've got plenty of support. He doesn't like this concept of we've got to get out the vote. He believes his supporters get out because they love him and they'll go do it. It is not a helpful message, because, as you know, you can support somebody, but you still need to get out there and sometimes remind people, make sure they have a plan, actually follow through. So I think he's trying to show this bravado that his supporters are so committed to him, a la I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, that they don't need to be told to vote, that they're going to go out and do it, blah, 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 blah. That's what he means.
Phil, who do you think is going to win the election and why?
I think Harris can win. I think it's 55.
Who will win?
Sorry?
You think she can win, but you think she will win?
Well, I hope so.
Okay.
I don't know. As you've
Okay.
said, it's a little too early. She's got momentum, but we'll see.
All right, Phil, thank you. Nancy, tell everybody who doesn't know where you're from, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind, please.
I am from a suburb of Philadelphia. I'm from Pennsylvania. I am supporting Harris. Not wholeheartedly. I mean, I'm not drinking that Kool-Aid either. At this point in life, it's kind of depressing. I find the whole thing very depressing. And I have to say that video of Harris with the helicopters was extremely troubling to me.
What was troubling about it?
Well, just because of what actually happened in that withdrawal. It was horrible. However, having said that, I wasn't really paying that close attention to that whole dynamic. And I can't believe what I understood about what happened there is that the government just fell apart. They all left the country. There was no support there for withdrawing any of those troops. So I find it really difficult when the media and everybody else says, oh, it's all that guy's fault, or oh, it's all that guy's fault. It's usually not. It's usually a combination of, maybe Trump shouldn't have said, I'll get out in 3.5 weeks. And maybe Biden should have been more on board with what was going on. At the end of the day, it was a travesty. It was just a travesty. And it was really troubling. The other thing I have a problem with is I know that Trump did some good things when he was in office. I'm a registered Republican. I know he did some good things when he was in office. I also know that as a person, I can't do that. I can't go down that road with him. So what I don't understand is why aren't his surrogates out there really touting these policies that when you have a conversation with a Trump supporter, that's what you get. Oh, I liked his policies. All right, great. What are they? Give me more than one. They really can't. And it's kind of troubling. On the other hand, Harris, to me, is more liberal than I want to be and what I want for our country. But I like her humanity. I think that's the piece. And the joy. I mean, you can say it all you want, but the woman brings joy. And we're tired of this fighting and divisiveness. My husband and I were just talking about this last night. There are very, very few political signs out. Very few. And the reason we think is because everybody's so divided. They're afraid to put a sign up for fear of what their neighbors are going to say. So who knows where that's going to go?
Nancy, Nancy, who are you voting for in your Senate race?
Well, that's another good question. I'm voting for Casey rather, and I'm voting for Casey because of his pro-choice stance, the reproductive rights. I think my husband's voting for the other guy, and we've done that a lot in our marriage, and that's okay. But and I'll work on him. I'm not done with him yet.
Sean or Dan? Sean, first question for Nancy.
If knowing that I got to make a case for Dave McCormick real quick. Knowing that the Senate doesn't have the votes to codify anything with respect to life, is there anything Dave McCormick could do to get you over the finish line towards the end on policy?
You know, it's funny with Dave McCormick, our last senatorial race when he was in the primaries with Oz, he went from what I thought was a reasonable person, and I supported him and voted for him, to a crazy man, to the you know, oh, I got to get all those, you know what it is, guys? You all know this. It's the primaries. The primaries are the killers, and people don't get it.
And I'm so glad you just brought that up. That's what's fascinating about the dynamic of this presidential race, what you're putting your finger on, Nancy. Because Harris didn't have to defend any of her positions from 2019, even, I mean, Dan and Mark are quasi-agreeing, I think. Yep. This dynamic has completely shifted. She's able to literally through surrogates, kind of what you're talking about, saying, oh, no, I don't believe that anymore. She actually personally hasn't even had to denounce it, but it's because she hasn't had to cater to the far left to get through that primary. It's a fascinating dynamic.
She started at the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all she has to do is stay at the top of the mountain and not fall down.
I hope, recognizing that the logic that we just discussed, that you might consider Dave McCormick one more time.
Nancy, what do you like about two-way?
Oh, you know I love you. I've been watching you forever and ever and ever. And I'm glad you brought that up.
How are you guys related? Are you a cousin or?
No, actually, I started watching Mark on Morning Joe, which I used to really like that show too. But anyway, I just find him very rational, respectful.
Thank you.
And I find it not offensive, but it bothers me when people are saying that this is all, you know, pro-left or even pro-right. It's not pro-anything at this point. I think you've done a tremendous job of presenting facts and ideas and philosophies and whatever in a respectful, kind of a neutral pathway. And that brings me to one other point I wanted to make. I personally think that we should have a debate on Fox. I think that it should be Bret Baier and Martha McCallum. I think they're both respectful, intelligent, ethical journalists, and I think they do a good job. And I think Nancy, that you would get both sides to watch it.
Thank you for your nice words, Nancy. Thank you for joining. Come back regularly. Appreciate it. All right. Cindy, unmute. You're unmuted. Tell everybody where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind, please.
Okay, I'm from Indiana, and I'm voting for Harris. And I appreciate this platform. It's sort of a haven for people who want to be independent voters anyway. And the reason I raised my hand is that I really don't understand how people who haven't decided on who to vote for, how they can vote for Trump if they watched the January 6th hearings. I've rewatched that recently, and all that testimony from all those Republicans, it's just, you know, I watched every day in 22.
Okay. Cindy,
and
got it?
I don't understand how anybody can get behind Trump.
Yeah. All right, let's get quick answers. Let's get quick answers from Dan and Sean, and then bring someone else in. Cindy, thank you. Go ahead, guys. Dan first.
I mean, I think, look, our previous, as Nancy said, you know, she liked Trump's policies and had trouble with his conduct. And, you know, some people like Harris's conduct and maybe don't know enough about her policies. For most people, all politics is local. And it really, you know, whatever one thinks of January 6th, it's really, what are you going to do for me tomorrow or today that drives their vote. And respectfully, I think most people did not take the time to watch all of those hearings. They're powerful if you did, but I think people are more concerned about prices and immigration.
I'll just say, I think most people vote on issues. That's what it comes down to. I'm not excusing at least, any of the actions of individuals in that day. But I also think there's a broader context and a much longer conversation as to, quote, who's to blame, which we don't have time to get into. But I do think that at the end of the day, Dan's right. I mean, this really comes down to what affects you day to day, and where you want to see the country. And I think that I don't want to try to, whatever you call the equivocate but there are several issues on the Biden-Harris side that I think many of us on the right find extremely offensive as well, and look at people and say, how could you possibly have seen that and vote for them? So I'm not trying to, I apologize, it's early on a Monday, but whatever the word I'm looking for is, but the bottom line is, I think there's both issues. There are issues on both sides that neither side understands why the other side doesn't see through on that. But Dan's right. Most of the folks actually care about a particular issue that affects their day-to-day life.
Mr. Sleem, welcome back. Remind everybody where you are, who you're supporting, and then close us out with a quick question, if you would.
Of course. I'm in Roslyn, Virginia right now. I'm originally from Long Island, New York. My parents are both Lebanese immigrants. I'm a first-generation American, just for some background. 2016, my mom voted for Hillary Clinton. My dad voted for Jill Stein. 2020, they both pulled the lever for Donald Trump because he kept us out of a new war in the Middle East, because he wanted to pull troops out of Syria. At least the military brass wasn't coordinating as much. But I just find it very peculiar how Harris has been allowed by the media to skate for a month and longer now without doing a single interview on. We have two wars that started during their administration that weren't there during President Trump's administration. Yeah, he goes on stage and says, if it was me, there would never been October 7th. Putin would have never invaded. We could debate and discuss if that would have happened all day long, but in 4 years it didn't happen. So it happened when new administration came in. I just find it incredible how they've let her skate for a month now, and we have two wars, one that could turn into World War III. Actually, two now, since Ukraine just invaded Russia, and everyone knows that when people say Ukraine in the news, it's basically the CIA now. So it's like, how long do we expect Putin to hold off from actually starting to fire nukes? How long are we expecting Iran and Hezbollah to stop and hold themselves back while everything happens? And Joe Biden's nowhere to be found. Today's the anniversary of Afghanistan 3 years ago, and it's just unbelievable to me. And my parents are probably stronger Trump supporters than I am these days, and probably very evangelical about that with all of their Lebanese friends here. But it's as someone who's living here and has the privilege of being an American, and just to look at like what the leadership currently is doing and where they're taking us when we're almost on the brink of World War III. Like, I'm like 24 years old. I'm trying to have a future here. I'm not trying to be in World War III or go serve in Taiwan or somewhere that this administration wants to get us into war in.
Thank you, man. Great comments. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming back. Dan, Sean, what do you guys have to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, for most Americans, whether this is good or bad, foreign policy is not a huge, issue to determine their vote, right? You hear a lot more talk about inflation and other issues. And so I think Harris will definitely have to address this in the debate. I imagine, if not her first interview, assuming she does a second, she will have to talk about foreign policy and where she stands. But I just don't think it's a top of mind for a lot of voters, whether that's right or wrong. It's just kind of where it is.
Sean?
Yeah, so I would just say, look, you go back to 2004, safety manifests itself in a different way for a lot of voters. What you're touching on, I think, is a safety issue. There's a lot of people who don't feel safe because of war, and that's not that. Dan's right. Most people don't vote on foreign policy, but they will vote on safety. Can the Trump team sort of migrate this issue from a foreign policy issue to a personal safety issue, to touch on exactly what you're saying? That's going to be the key. Can it come up in a debate? I think the way you're framing it is exactly the way that the Trump team needs to do that. I kept you safe. There's a myriad of threats that we face around the globe right now because of their inaction. So I think this is a huge opportunity. And I will say, I've brought this idea of X factors up. We've all talked about it over the last couple months. This is another X factor, whether it's, Ukraine / Putin, whether it's North Korea, Iran, and Hezbollah, whether it's China doing something provocative in the 7th Fleet AOR. There's a lot of stuff that could potentially change the dynamic of this race. And I think that you're putting your finger on something that's a very interesting sub issue here. Thanks for coming back. We like having you. All right, guys, real quick. Sean, your interview with James Blair, the Trump campaign, it's got lots of attention. You talked about the Electoral College. You talked about a tweet he did about Kamala Harris and drinking alcohol. Tell people why they should watch and where they can watch it. Well, I think there's two, and I'm not trying to tout, but Mark put together this really good state of play of where the race stands, and I brought it up and said, okay, let's go through Mark Halperin's take. Tell me if you agree or disagree. I brought up the Tim Hogan tweet question about drinking. We don't have enough time, but if you go to the YouTube page, he answers each of the questions. I don't think he shies away from anything in terms of defending. Now, he did give his take. There's no question about it, but you can go to my YouTube page and watch it. But I'm just telling you that I actually, the reason I think it's gotten the attention that it did is because he gave a very honest assessment about each of those things. You may not agree with it, but I think it's worth the watch. So if you go to Sean M. Spicer on YouTube. He also talks about the field operation and how this legal ruling allows them to coordinate with outside groups on field. It's one of the most revealing interviews I've seen on video of any senior Trump campaign official. Journalist Sean Spicer getting this story. So I strongly recommend you watch it. Yeah, get on the treadmill, 45 minutes, watch it. Thank you all for joining. Thank Dan for filling in for Tim, who hopefully will be back soon. I'll be back later today, probably 9 o'clock Eastern time. We're still working on it. But you'll get a notification, watch my Twitter feed, my Substack, and we'll be back tomorrow for another edition. Thanks everybody for asking questions today. We'll see you 9 a.m. Same bad time, same bad channel tomorrow right here on the morning meeting.